What secret was revealed when cleaning out the home of a deceased family member? My great-grandmother was something else, let me tell you. She wasn't your typical old lady who sits around knitting and watching soap operas all day. No, she was a real force of nature, even in her late 90s. She'd been a Mary Kay makeup consultant for over 50 years, and she was damn good at it. She wasn't just selling lipstick and blush, she was building a legacy. I mean, this lady had a full collection of those iconic pink Cadillacs, the ones Mary Kay awards to their top consultants. She had more than most folks could dream of, but you'd never catch her bragging about it. She was humble, always quick to credit her customers and the people who helped her along the way. That's just how she was. She had a lovely house, the kind that looked like it came straight out of one of those home decor magazines. It was filled with all sorts of little trinkets and mementos from her travels and life adventures. And boy, did she have adventures. But I didn't really know about those until I was older. To me, she was just Grandma Kay, the sweetest old lady who'd slip me a couple of bucks whenever I visited, always with a wink and a smile like we were in on some secret. And let me tell you, she was famous in our little town. Everyone knew Grandma Kay, and not just because of the makeup. She was so well loved and respected that Mary Kay itself threw a massive celebration in her honor when she hit her 50-year mark. We're talking a huge event, the kind with catered food, flowers, and even a damn band. I remember walking into the hotel ballroom they'd rented out for the occasion, the place decked out in pinks and golds, and it felt like stepping into a movie. There were people from all over the country, folks she'd worked with, mentored, and even some who'd never met her but knew her by reputation. The highlight, though, was when one of Mary Kay's own grandchildren showed up to thank her personally for her dedication. It was surreal, seeing this tiny old lady, who was barely 5 feet tall on a good day, standing up there on stage, getting teary-eyed while accepting a big bouquet of roses. They even made it onto the Dallas News that night. There was Grandma Kay, all dolled up with her perfect hair and makeup, looking as radiant as ever. I'll never forget it. Seeing her celebrated like that was a proud moment for our whole family. But here's the thing. There was more to Grandma Kay than met the eye. I grew up thinking she was just this sweet old lady who loved to bake cookies and spoil her great-grandkids. And she was, don't get me wrong. But apparently, there was a whole other side to her that I didn't know about until I was older. It wasn't until I turned 18 that my mom and aunts started sharing some of the more colorful stories about Grandma Kay. It turns out she had a wild streak, one that would have shocked the folks who only knew her as the poised, polished Mary Kay consultant. I remember the first time I heard one of these stories. It was at a family barbecue, and the adults had all had a few drinks. My mom leaned over and said, "You know, when you were a kid, we kept things PG around you, but now that you're an adult, I think it's time you heard about the real Grandma Kay." I was curious but a little hesitant. I mean, what could she possibly have done that was so wild? Boy, was I in for a surprise. My mom started with a story about how, back in the day, Grandma Kay used to sneak out of the house after putting her kids to bed to go dancing with her girlfriends. They'd hit up this little speakeasy on the outskirts of town. Now, this was the 1940s we're talking about, and Grandma was already a mom of 3 but apparently she could dance circles around women half her age, and she was a bit of a flirt, too. My mom said she'd never forget the day she found out. She was maybe 10 years old at the time. She got up in the middle of the night for a glass of water and saw Grandma Kay sneaking back in through the kitchen window, high heels in hand, giggling like a schoolgirl. And that was just the beginning. As I got older, I heard more and more stories, like how she once got kicked out of a casino in Vegas for counting cards, or the time she convinced my grandpa to go skinny dipping with her in a hotel pool on their 50th wedding anniversary. I couldn't believe it at first. I mean, this was the same woman who wouldn't let me watch The Simpsons because she thought it was too inappropriate. But the more I heard, the more it started to make sense. Grandma Kay wasn't just some cookie-cutter sweet old lady. She was a woman who'd lived a full, vibrant life, and she didn't let anything hold her back. She was also known for her, let's say, unconventional advice. I remember one time my cousin, who was going through a rough patch with his girlfriend, went to Grandma Kay for some wisdom. He thought she'd tell him to buy flowers or write a heartfelt letter. Instead, she said, "Honey, if she's giving you that much trouble, just buy her a vibrator. She'll be in a better mood, and you'll get some peace and quiet." I thought he was making it up until he showed me the text where she actually sent him a link to buy one on Amazon. And she was a riot at family gatherings. The older she got, the less she seemed to care about what people thought. She'd crack jokes that would make a sailor blush, and she had this way of looking so innocent while doing it, like she was just some sweet little old lady who didn't know any better. But trust me, she knew exactly what she was doing. It was all part of her charm. I think that's what made her so special. She wasn't just one thing. She was this beautiful, complicated mix of sweetness and sass, elegance and mischief. She knew how to light up a room, whether it was with her infectious smile or her unexpected one-liners. And she loved her family fiercely. No matter how wild the stories got, no matter how many crazy things she did, she was always there for us, always ready with a hug or a laugh or a bit of advice, whether we wanted it or not. In a way, I think she taught us all a valuable lesson about life. She showed us that it's okay to have fun, to take risks, to be a little inappropriate sometimes, because life is short and you never know what's going to happen. So why not make the most of it? Why not have a little fun along the way? That's what Grandma Kay did, and I think we're all better for it. When Grandma Kay passed, it hit our family hard. She was 98, and we knew it was coming, but that doesn't make it any easier, you know? It felt like the end of an era, like we were losing this irreplaceable piece of our family's heart and history. She'd been the matriarch, the glue that held us all together, and without her, we were a little lost. But life goes on, and there were things that had to be done. After the funeral, we had to go through her house to sort out her things. It was one of those big old houses, with more rooms than you'd think necessary, and closets packed to the brim with the bits and pieces of a lifetime. Now, I'd been to her house 1,000,000 times, but I'd never seen half of what we found that day. It was like walking through a museum of her life. Every room told a story. There were photos from her Mary Kay days, newspaper clippings from when she was honored, all those little pink Cadillacs proudly displayed on a shelf in the living room. It was all pretty standard stuff at first. But then we got to her office. Her office was like stepping into another world. The walls were lined with shelves, packed tight with books about relationships, fashion, and self-improvement. It was a bit of a surprise, to be honest. I'd never pegged her as someone who'd have that much interest in that kind of stuff. But there it was, a veritable library of every relationship guide, self-help book, and fashion magazine you could think of, some of them dating back to the 60s and 70s. I remember my mom just shaking her head and laughing, saying, "I guess that's how she kept Grandpa on his toes all those years." And then there were the boxes. 2 of them, sitting on the top shelf of her closet, covered in dust, nearly 50 years old according to the labels she'd neatly written in her perfect cursive handwriting. One of them was marked simply, Relationship Bible. Now, I don't know what we were expecting, but it sure as hell wasn't what we found. We opened it up, and there it was. A thick binder filled with page after page of what can only be described as a guide to everything you could possibly want to know about keeping a relationship spicy. I'm talking detailed descriptions of different positions, tips for improving pleasure for both partners, ways to keep things fresh and exciting. She'd even cut out articles from magazines and pasted them in there, with little notes in the margins like, "Tried this in 1983. Worked wonders." I couldn't believe my eyes. This was my sweet little great-grandmother we were talking about, the one who baked us cookies and made sure we said grace before dinner. But here was this whole other side of her, one that was open, unashamed, and completely unfiltered. And then we found the journal. This wasn't just any journal, mind you. It was thick, with a worn leather cover, filled with handwritten entries that spanned nearly 45 years. It didn't take long to figure out that this journal was dedicated to one person. Russ. Now, none of us had ever heard of Russ before. There wasn't a Roos in the family, and there certainly hadn't been one at the funeral. So who the hell was he? We started reading, and let me tell you, it was like diving into a romance novel, but more intense, more real, because this was Grandma Kay's life we were talking about. She wrote about him with such detail and passion. It was almost like she was describing a character from a book, except this wasn't fiction. She wrote about their first meeting, how he made her feel, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he smelled like cedar and something earthy she couldn't quite place. And the more we read, the more it became clear just how much this man meant to her. She didn't hold back either. There were entries that made us blush, describing their time together in ways I never would have expected from someone of her generation. I'm talking full-on descriptions of their intimate moments, written with a level of detail that would have made a romance novelist jealous. She wrote about how he made her feel alive, how he'd brought out a side of her she didn't even know existed. And it wasn't just the physical stuff, though there was plenty of that. She wrote about their conversations, the way he'd challenge her ideas, the way he'd make her laugh. She wrote about his laugh too, saying it was deep and rumbly, like distant thunder, and how it always made her feel safe and warm. And it wasn't a fling either. This was a relationship that spanned decades, even though they weren't together in the traditional sense. She mentioned how they'd go years without seeing each other, but then he'd come back into her life, and it was like no time had passed. They'd pick up right where they left off, with the same intensity, the same passion. She wrote about their stolen weekends, their secret getaways, and the letters he'd send her, which she kept in a little box we found at the bottom of the closet. Reading through her journal, I felt like I was seeing her for the first time. Like the person I thought I knew was only a small part of who she really was. She'd had this whole other life, one filled with love and passion and adventure. It was bittersweet, learning all of this after she was gone. I wish I could have talked to her, asked her how she managed to balance it all, how she kept such a big part of her life hidden. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was something just for her, something she didn't want to share with the world, not even with us. I remember sitting there, surrounded by her books and her journals, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I was proud in a way that she'd lived such a full life, that she'd found this incredible love that had lasted decades. But I was also a little sad, because it felt like we'd only known part of it. Then again, maybe that's true of everyone. We all have our secrets, our private lives that we keep tucked away, even from the people closest to us. In the end, we decided to keep the journal and the letters in the family. We figured it was something special, something that should stay with us, even if we didn't talk about it much. It was a reminder that she was more than just a great-grandmother, more than just a sweet old lady who sold makeup and baked cookies. She was a woman who lived a big, bold life, one filled with love and passion and a little bit of mystery. And I think that's something worth celebrating. And it didn't stop at just the words. As if the journal entries weren't eye-opening enough, we found a stack of photos tucked away in the back of that same closet, wrapped in a piece of old floral fabric. When we opened it up, there they were, pictures of Grandma Kay and Russ together, living out everything she'd written about and then some. There were snapshots of them, laughing on a beach somewhere, holding hands on a balcony overlooking the city, and one of them at what looked like a fancy dinner party, both dressed to the nines. And then there were the more intimate ones, pictures that showed a side of her none of us had ever imagined. The two of them caught in candid, tender moments that made her journal come alive in a way we hadn't expected. Some people might have been shocked by it, but honestly, it didn't change how I saw her one bit. If anything, it made me admire her even more. I mean, here was this sweet old lady, the one who made the best damn apple pie I've ever tasted and never missed a Sunday service, living a life most people wouldn't have the guts to dream of. She knew what she wanted, and she wasn't afraid to go after it, no matter what anyone thought. She didn't let the expectations of the world box her in, didn't let the fact that she was a wife, a mother, a Mary Kay lady, keep her from being everything she wanted to be. She was this tiny, elegant woman, always dressed just so, with her perfectly styled hair and that classic red lipstick. But behind that polite smile and those kind eyes was a woman who was wild and free, who grabbed life with both hands and didn't let go. Looking at those pictures, I realized how little I'd really known her. Not in a sad way, but in a way that made me feel like I'd just discovered this whole new dimension to one that made me even prouder to be her great-grand. Because let's be real, how many people get to live like with such passion and courage? How many people can say they truly lived, that they followed their heart wherever it led them, even when it went against the grain? She did, and that takes guts. I miss her a lot, more than I can put into words. There are days when I'd give anything to sit down with her, to hear her laugh, to listen to her stories. But now, I wish I could have known her in the way my mom and aunts did, to have seen that vibrant, unfiltered side. I wish I'd been old enough, brave enough to ask her about Russ, to hear her tell those stories in her own words. I can just imagine the sparkle in her eyes, the way her smile would have widened as she reminisced, because I bet she would have told. She never was one to shy away from the truth. Not really. And now that I know what I do, I realize she'd been dropping hints all along, in those winks and sly little smiles, in the way she always seemed to know just a little more than she let on. My mom says I take after her in a lot of ways. I've got her hair, this thick dark mass that refuses to be tamed, and maybe even a bit of her looks, though I never saw it myself. But I hope I've got some of that spirit too, that fire because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that life's too short to be anything less than fully yourself. I don't want to live a life of regrets, of missed chances and unspoken feelings. I want to be like her, bold, unapologetic, true to who I am no matter what. That's what she taught me, even after she was gone. It wasn't just about the love she had for Russ or the crazy adventures she went on. It was about the way she lived her life, with this unwavering sense of self, this fearless embrace of everything that came her way. She wasn't afraid to love deeply, to laugh loudly, to be exactly who she was, without apology. And that's a rare thing. I think we could all use a little more of that, don't you? A little more courage to live the way we want to live, to love the way we want to love. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what anyone else thinks. It's about being able to look back on your life and know that you were true to yourself, that you made the most of every moment, just like she did. I keep one of those pictures in my wallet. It's a small one, black and white, taken who knows where, of the two of them sitting on a park bench. She's leaning into him, her head on his shoulder, eyes closed, with the kind of smile that only comes from being completely at peace. And he's got this look on his face, this mix of love and contentment, like he can't believe his luck. It's my reminder, whenever life gets tough or I start second-guessing myself, that there's more to all of this than just getting by. There's living, really living, the way she did. And that's what I want to do. So yeah, Grandma Kay was something else. A trailblazer, a firecracker, a woman who knew how to live and love and laugh in a way that most people only dream about. I think about her a lot, more now that I know the full story. And I just hope that wherever she is, she knows how much she means to us, how much she taught us, not just with her words, but with her life. She showed us what it means to be truly alive, to embrace every moment with open arms and a full heart. And that's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. And get this, if you thought Grandma Kay's secrets were wild, just wait. While we were sifting through all her stuff, my cousin came across this old tattered journal shoved behind some boxes in the attic. It was one of those leather-bound kinds with yellowing pages and handwriting so faded you could barely make it out. It was like something straight out of a history museum. Turns out it dated back to the 19th century, and it wasn't even hers. It belonged to some long-gone ancestor we'd never heard of. I'm talking way, way back, like before we even had electricity in this town. We started flipping through it, and let me tell you, it was like stepping back in time. The entries were mostly about daily life, farming, family, the struggles of getting by. But then we hit this section where the tone totally shifted. This ancestor, a man named Silas, started writing about this crazy invention he was working. It was this machine that could separate the cotton fibers from the seeds way faster than anyone could do by hand. As we read on, we realized he was describing a prototype of the cotton gin, almost a year before Eli Whitney patented his design. Now, I'm no history buff, but even I knew that the cotton gin was a big deal. It basically changed the whole agriculture game back then, making it so much easier to process cotton. But here was this guy, my ancestor, who'd come up with the same idea all on his own. He just didn't have the resources or knowledge to get it out. He didn't know a damn thing about patents or how to protect his invention. By the time he heard about Whitney's gin, it was too late. He got beat to the punch, and his idea was lost to history. Can you imagine having this incredible world-changing idea only to see someone else get all the credit? It made me think about my family in a whole new light. It's like we've always been filled with these amazing, colorful characters, people who were ahead of their time in so many ways, but who never quite got the recognition they deserve. We've got Grandma Kay, who lived this vibrant, daring life that was 1,000 times more interesting than most people ever knew. And we've got Silas, who could have been a part of history if things had gone just a little different. It's like they were cut from the same cloth. People who lived their lives to the fullest, who didn't let the world define who they were or what they could do. And you know what? I think there's something to be learned from. Grandma Kay always used to say that it didn't matter what other people thought, that the only thing that mattered was how you felt about yourself at the end of the day. It's easy to get caught up in what other people expect of you, to let their opinions shape your decisions. But if Grandma Kay taught us anything, it's that you've got to live your own life, make your own choices, and not be afraid to stand out, even if it means breaking a few rules along the way. I think about Silas too. I mean, he got dealt a rough hand. He had this incredible idea, something that could have made him famous, changed his life, maybe even changed the world a little. And yeah, it's a damn shame he never got the credit. But you know what? He still did it. He still came up with that idea, still put in the time and effort to make it a reality. That says something. It says that even if you don't get the recognition, even if nobody knows what you've done, it still matters. Your work, your passion, your creativity. It still means something. You don't have to be in the history books for your life to have value. My great-grandmother may not be around anymore, but she left behind more than just memories. She left a legacy of living life with passion, embracing who you are, and never being afraid to be yourself, no matter what people think. And now, knowing what I know, I think that legacy runs deeper than just her. It's like it's woven into the fabric of our family, this stubborn refusal to let the world define us, this drive to carve out our own paths, even if they lead us into places no one else has been before. I guess that's why, despite all the craziness, I feel proud. Proud of Grandma Kay, proud of Silas, proud of all those ancestors who came before us, who lived their lives the way they wanted, even if it meant flying under the radar. And I want to keep that spirit alive. I want to live my life with the same kind of passion, the same kind of fearlessness. I want to be able to look back decades from now and know that I didn't hold back, that I made the most of every opportunity, every chance that came my way. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that life is too short to play it safe. It's too short to worry about what other people think or to get hung up on the things that didn't go your way. You've got to grab life with both hands and squeeze every drop of joy, every ounce of experience out of it. That's what Grandma Kay did, and that's what I'm going to do too. I'm going to live boldly, love fiercely, and never be afraid to be myself, just like she was. And who knows? Maybe one day, someone will find something I've left behind. An old journal, a stack of pictures, something that shows who I really was. And maybe, just maybe, they'll see a little bit of her in me, that same fire, that same spirit, because that's the best legacy I can think of, carrying on the lessons she taught us, not just with her words, but with the way she lived her life. That's something I'm going to hold on to forever.